voice for you today. My throat is still sore. I don't know what's going on with it. So I'm going to try. I actually found this case. My sister recommended it because, she watches my videos and then she gets caught in the YouTube web. And I first read it and I was like, oh, it's not really a lot of information. And I don't really, But then as I did some more digging, I decided that I would share it with you and then we could talk about it together. So this is the case of Diane Downs. Diane was born Elizabeth Diane Fredrickson, and then she took the name Downs. She is a convicted murderer responsible for shooting her 3 children. Stick with me and then we'll talk about it, okay? Diane Downs was born August 7th, 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. Oldest of 4 children, her parents were named Wes and Willadine, and they moved her family from different towns until Wes got a stable job with the U.S. Postal Service around the time that Diane was 11. The Fredricksons had very conservative values, and until the age of 14, she seemed to follow her parents' rules. When she entered into her teen years, a more defiant Diane emerged as she struggled to fit into the in crowd at school, much of which went against the wishes of her parents. At the age of 14, she dropped her formal name, Elizabeth, for her middle name, Diane, got rid of her childish hairstyle, instead opting for a trendy, shorter, bleach blonde style. She started wearing clothing that was more stylish and showed off her maturing figure. She also began a relationship with Stephen Downs, a 16-year-old boy who lived across the street. Her parents didn't approve of Stephen or their relationship, but that did little to sway Diane, and by the time she was 16, their relationship had become sexual. After high school, Stephen joined the Navy, and Diane attended Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College. It's a mouthful, huh? They promised to remain faithful to each other, but Diane apparently failed at that, and after 1 year at the school, she was expelled for promiscuity. Their long-distance relationship seemed to survive, though, and in November of 1973, with Stephen now home from the Navy, they decided to get married. The marriage was tumultuous from the start. They fought about money, and accusations of infidelity often resulted in spurts of Diane leaving Stephen to go to her parents' house. In 1974, despite problems in their marriage, they had their first child, Christy. 6 months later, Diane joined the Navy, but she returned home after 3 weeks of basic training because of severe blisters. She later said that her real reason for getting out of the Navy was because Stephen was neglecting Christy. That actually happened to my brother. He got such bad blisters that his foot got infected and he got discharged from the Army. So it's possible. Having a child did not seem to help their marriage, but Diane enjoyed being pregnant, and in 1975, their second child, Cheryl Lynn, was born. 2 children was enough for Stephen, and he had a vasectomy. But this did not stop Diane from getting pregnant again. This time, she decided to have an abortion, and she named the aborted child Carrie. In 1978, the Downs moved to Mesa, Arizona, where they both found jobs at a mobile home manufacturing company. There, Diane began having affairs with some of her coworkers and became pregnant again. In December of 1979, Stephen Danny Downs was born, and Stephen Sr., accepted the child, although he knew he was not the father years moving in and out with different men, having affairs with married men, and at times trying to reconcile with Stephen. To help support herself, she decided to become a surrogate mother, but she failed 2 psychiatric exams that are required for applicants. One of the tests showed that she was very intelligent, but also psychotic, a fact that she found funny and liked to brag to her friends about. In 1981, Diane got a full-time job with the Postal Service, and the children often stayed with their parents, Stephen, or with Danny's father. When the children did stay with Diane, neighbors voiced their concerns about their care. They were often seen poorly dressed for the weather, and sometimes asking for food because they were hungry. If Diane was unable to find a sitter, she would still go to work, leaving 6-year-old Christy in charge of the children. In the latter part of 1981, Diane was finally accepted into the surrogate program, to which she was paid $10,000 after successfully carrying a child to term. After this experience, she decided to try to open her own surrogate clinic, but this venture quickly failed. It was during this time that she met coworker Robert Nick Knickerbocker. He was the man of her dreams. Their relationship was all-consuming, and she wanted him to leave his wife. He felt suffocated by her demands and still loved his wife, so he ended their relationship. Diane was devastated and moved back to Oregon, but did not fully accept that their relationship was over. She continued to write and had one final visit in April 1983, at which time he completely rejected her, told her their relationship was over, and that he had no interest in being a daddy to her children, which I imagine was pretty devastating for her. On May 19th, 1983, at around 10 p.m., on their way home from a friend's house, Diane pulled over on the side of a quiet road near Springfield, Oregon, and shot her 3 children multiple times. She then shot herself in the arm and drove slowly to McKenzie Willamette Hospital. When she arrived, hospital staff found Cheryl dead and Danny and Christy barely alive. Diane told doctors and police that the children were shot by a bushy-haired man who flagged her down on the road and then tried to hijack her car. When she refused, the man started shooting. Detectives found the story suspicious, and her reactions to police questioning and hearing about the conditions of her 2 children seemed inappropriate and odd. The dog is snoring again. She voiced surprise that a bullet hit Danny's spine and not his heart. She seemed more concerned about getting in touch with Nick rather than informing the children's father or asking about their condition. And Diane talked a lot, apparently too much for someone who had just suffered such a traumatic event. Diane's story of the events of the tragic night failed to hold up under forensic investigation. The blood spatter in the car did not match her version of what happened, and gunpowder residue was not found where it should have been found. Her arm, although broken when shot, was superficial compared to that of her children. It was also discovered that she failed to admit to owning a .22 caliber handgun, which was the same type of gun used at the crime scene. Her diary that was found during a search helped the police piece together a motive. In her diary, she wrote obsessively about Robert Knickerbocker, or Nick, and of peculiar interest was the part about him not wanting to raise her children. There was also a unicorn statue found, which she had purchased just days before the children were shot. Each of the children's names had been inscribed on it, almost as if it was a shrine to their memory. A witness came forward and said that he had to pass Diane on the road the night of the shooting because she was driving so slowly. This, of course, conflicted with her story in which she said she sped in terror to the hospital. But the most telling evidence was that of her surviving daughter, Christy, who for months was unable to speak due to a stroke that she suffered during the attack. During the times that Diane would visit her, she would show signs of fear, and her vital signs would spike. When she was able to speak, she eventually told prosecutors there was no stranger, and it was her mother that did the shooting. Just prior to her arrest, Diane, likely feeling that the investigation was closing in on her, met with detectives to tell them something that she'd left out of her original story. She told them that the shooter was someone that she'd known because he called her by her name. If they had bought her admission, it would have meant several more months of investigation, but they didn't believe her, and instead suggested that she did it because her lover did not want children. On February 28, 1984, after 9 months of intensive investigation, Diane Downs, now pregnant, was arrested and charged with murder, attempted murder, and criminal assault of her 3 children. Several months before the trial, she had spent a lot of time being interviewed by reporters, and her goal was probably to strengthen the general public's sympathy for her, but it really seemed to have an adverse reaction because of her inappropriate responses to reporters' questions. Instead of appearing like a mother destroyed by tragic events, she appeared narcissistic, callous, and strange. The trial began May 10th, 1984, and lasted 6 weeks. Prosecutor Fred Hughey laid out the state's case, which showed motive, evidence, and witnesses that contradicted her story to the police, and finally an eyewitness, her own daughter Christy, who testified that it was Diane who was the shooter. On the defense side, Diane's lawyer, Jim Jagger, admitted his client was obsessed with Nick, but pointed to a childhood littered with an incestuous relationship with her father as reasons for her promiscuity and inappropriate behavior after the incident. I'm not even going to touch that one. The jury found Diane Downs guilty of all charges on June 17th, 1984. She was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. In 1986, prosecutor Fred Hughey and his wife adopted Christy and Danny Downs. Diane gave birth to her 4th child, who she named Amy, in July of 1984. The baby was removed from Diane and later adopted, and given a new name, Rebecca. It releases her last name, but I'm not gonna. You could find her if you wanted to, but in later years, Rebecca was interviewed on the Oprah show, and on 2020, she spoke of her troubled life and of the short time that she communicated with Diane. She has since changed her life around, and with help determined that the apple can fall far, far from the tree. Diane's father denied the accusations of incest, and Diane later recanted that part of her story. To this day, her father believes in her innocence and operates a web page on which he is offering $100,000 to anyone who can offer information that will completely exonerate Diane and free her from prison. She actually managed to escape. On July 11th of 1987, she climbed over a barbed wire fence, and they found her 10 days later, about 4 miles from the prison. She was in a bedroom with a guy. She was first eligible for parole in 2008, and during that hearing she continued to say she was innocent. Quote, "Over the years I have told you and the rest of the world that a man shot me and my children. I have never changed my story." End quote. Yet through the years her story has changed continuously, from the assailant being 1 man to 2 men. And at one point she said that the concentrated in California. So I knew it wouldn't be a very long case, and that's kind of, I didn't really want to talk about moms killing their children. I feel like that's kind of been sort of a thing on my channel as little kids, and it horrifies me. But I read another article on this case, and it actually talks about the evidence in this case. So they talk about how the blood spatters didn't match her story, and how the gunpowder was not where it was supposed to be, namely on Diane. There was no gunpowder residue found on her hands, on her at all. She did go to the restroom once she got to the hospital, so she could have washed her hands, but it wouldn't have been enough. I guess gunpowder is very, very, very hard to get off. And, well, they said that her arm wound was superficial. It shattered her bone, and she had to have surgery and have a plate put in. So I guarantee you that she was hurting. They actually made her drive them back out to the site before they treated her arm, which I think is crazy. It probably maybe just looked superficial and they didn't really x-ray it or anything before. But then I read an article that said that she was kept away from the children for many, many months, and that they believe that Christy was coerced into saying that it was her mom that shot them, when later on Christy recanted that information and said that she remembered seeing her mom standing outside the car with the man that shot them. She was very young when all of this happened, so if people continuously said to her, "It was your mom, it was your mom, it was your mom," I feel like, I believe that I would have to check it, so I can't remember. It was just one article, whether she was 9 or 11 when she testified, I don't. But at that age, I feel like there should be a certain age where people are allowed to testify in such serious cases. You know, when, like in the Caden Mancuso case, do you want to spend time with your dad? Yes, no. Like, do you have fun? Is he mean to you? Etc. That did not involve him spending his life in prison. I don't know, maybe I'm off my rocker here, but I don't know. Anne Rule wrote a book about this case. I'm thinking about reading it, because I would love to hear more about the evidence that they did find, and the blood spatter, because I really couldn't find anything about it. But I thought it was super weird that there was no gunpowder residue on her hands. If she shot that many times, there should be some gunpowder residue on her hands. And, okay, driving slowly to the hospital while your arm is broken, probably dangly. You've just watched your children get shot. One of them's probably deceased at this point, unfortunately, and it probably did look like it caught him in the heart. No wonder she was surprised it hit his spine and not his heart. I don't think that is a signal that she was guilty, because she seemed surprised at where it hit. Like, oh, he actually ended up paralyzed and never recovered. He's, but I don't know. I think she was in shock, and she didn't have anyone. She was trying to reach out to the love of her life for some comfort, even if he didn't want her. She just wanted some comfort, and everybody thought that she shot them, so no one was comforting her. I do, like, you become shell-shocked, and you don't know what to say, and you don't know what to do, and it was just a terrible situation.